It's recording. All right. Hey, my name is Aaron Williams. I am in Public Speaking 101. I'm just doing this speech to describe in an informational way the career field of military chaplaincy. Now, for me, military chaplaincy, I didn't really know anything about military chaplains or anything until I went to basic military training in the Air Force. So basically this is just actually a picture of my brother Ryan Williams, his graduating class. He's the guy with the guidon bear in the middle. He has his TIs in the back, and everyone has their serious faces after they just graduated. The thing is, in basic military training, as any military member knows, it's filled with fear. The trainees are all filled with uncertainty. They are made to think that they are pretty much going to fail the process, and they're basically just there doing their best to make it till the end. And for me, I actually ended up becoming a chapel guide. So on Sundays, I was the person who was in charge of basically chauffeuring various trainees to their religious whatever they wanted to go through. Like I was with the Protestant groups, so there's Catholics, Mormons, and various other religious groups. And I was just in charge of chauffeuring people. And that's the first time. It was from Sunday to Sunday where I was receiving comfort from the military chaplains, and just seeing that basically the spiritual, emotional, and mental comfort and support that they offered was a large helper for a lot of people. And chaplains don't only stop at basic military training offering service members help. They help people during the most trying of deployments, and especially for active duty personnel, day by day, week by week, they are there helping people out. So as far as like why somebody might want to listen to this speech, motivation-wise, if you're a military member, chances are you know what chaplains are all about. Perhaps this will just give you a little bit of insight, because I'm actually a person who's trying to become a chaplain. I'm in the process of it. For most civilians, I've heard quite a few, I guess, misconceptions that various people have about chaplains, so hopefully this will clarify some details about chaplains, what they either are or not, about the requirements and so forth. So anyway, like I said, I'm in the process of becoming a chaplain. In this speech, I'm just going to quickly address an overview of chaplaincy, including the requirements of military chaplaincy, the nature of military chaplaincy, and the benefits that are offered military chaplains. Then I'm going to give 3 real-life illustrations of various chaplains whom I've either met in person or who I've just read about and researched. So moving right into that first point, the requirements for military chaplaincy. Basically, there are 3 major requirements that all chaplains have to have. First of all, they have to have what is called a Master of Divinity, which is a minimum of a 72-credit master degree. It's the professional religious training type degree that it's offered at various seminaries. Like basically, it's broken up into 2 sections. There are the practical ministry classes and non-practical ministry. Practical ministries are just hands-on, like counseling, leadership, preaching, teaching, marriage classes and stuff like that. And then the non-practical side of the formal educational piece is the classes like Bible, Greek, Hebrew, theology, church history, apologetics, and various other classes. Moving on from there, the second requirement that all chaplains must have is they must have what is called an ecclesiastical endorsement. And basically that just means that a chaplain must be endorsed by a certain religious group, such as for Protestants it might be the Nazarenes, the Presbyterians, the Assembly of God, Southern Baptist. A group has to endorse a chaplain and it has to be a group that the military recognizes as accredited. So you just can't have random people endorsing themselves. It has to be, anyway, a widely known and sound accreditation group. And then the final thing that all chaplains must have requirement-wise is they must have at least 2 years of full-time pastoral experience. And basically, this goes hand in hand with what is proclaimed on airforce.com or in army.com and other branches. Basically, like the Army, they say, you learn how to be a pastor on the civilian side, and then we will teach you how to be a soldier. And so just 2 years of full-time pastoral experience, so that people who are trained on the civilian side as pastors can then just transfer that service into a military context. And that leads into the second overview item of chaplaincy, basically the nature of chaplaincy. It's basically just military pastor. Everything that a pastor does, teaching, preaching, counseling, marriage seminars, potentially funerals, weddings, and stuff like that, what chaplains do is they just take that into a military context. So now they're not only, say, teaching the Bible, but they're also going to exalt, say, the Air Force core values: integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. They're going to be a big part of basically the moral system of the Air Force and other branches. And so it's a military context. Along with military context, like, one of the misconceptions that I've got a lot from especially civilians is people ask, as a chaplain, do you have to compromise your faith? And the answer to that is no. The military does not want chaplains to basically overstep their bounds of faith. So, like, I believe, say, Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God. That's a very set belief. A Muslim would not believe that, and I do not have to compromise my faith for somebody else. Basically, as a chaplain, I would have to be willing to minister to any kind of service member, offering general counseling purposes, but more than anything for, like, the religious services, basically I would direct people accordingly, so that basically there's a chaplain system where chaplains are working together and offering all service members of various religious backgrounds their religious needs, their rights. Anyway, also, as far as, like, military, the nature of military chaplaincy, so there are dress and appearance standards, there are PT standards, there's typically push-ups, sit-ups, running standards that chaplains must meet. They basically need to be airmen or soldiers or marine sailors, whatever branch they're in. They do have to uphold these certain standards. That's part of the military context, the military discipline. And as far as, like, another question I've gotten asked is, like, how are chaplains involved in, like, say, the war effort specifically, and basically they do support, basically they're involved in the morale of various units, and they have an instrumental role in briefing commanders of, like, how military units are doing. Because chaplains have some inside information that typically people from other, like, various commanders and superiors don't know about, but chaplains can say, like, hey, the morale of the unit's either good, and they can give some suggestions for how things can be, you know, accommodated if things are lacking in various ways. But basically, chaplains, the only time they would ever carry a weapon system would be for self-defense purposes only. Typically, that's just going to be an M9 pistol. They're going to be trained on that, but it's only to be used in emergencies if they have to defend themselves. Typically, chaplains are offered chaplain assistants who are fully trained as far as not only offering chapel assistance, but they're also the protectors of the chaplains. So then moving from there, so that's the nature of military chaplaincy. As far as, like, the benefits of chaplains, so first of all, chaplains are commissioned officers. They are paid as such. So, like, a major in 04, which is pretty easy to make over time as a chaplain, they're going to make a little bit over $100,000 a year. They are going to be offered comprehensive health benefits. So basically, their family and everything's going to be taken care of. If they get injured, which happens, you know, in war situations and various other situations, they're going to be taken care of. So they're not going to have to worry about, you know, basically just getting injured, being discharged because of injury, and just not being provided for. There are comprehensive health benefits. Also, as far as the extensive education that chaplains need, there are a lot of help, such as the GI Bill, various debt repayment programs. Sometimes various branches will pay for certain amounts of years for chaplains to go to school, especially at the master level, to pay for what could be extensive, you know, financial matters that could end up leading into a lot of debt. So there's a lot of help financially for chaplains to meet their requirements that they need, and, you know, they can retire after 20 years. And as a final thing, a lot of people wonder, you know, what kind of job opportunity there is for various jobs before they get into it. And the thing is, chaplain, it's a really hard career to get into because there are a lot of extensive requirements, but because of that, there is a great need for chaplains. Typically, the military, every branch is severely lacking chaplains, so chaplains, typically people who meet the requirements for chaplaincy, are going to have abundant work opportunities. So that just covers the overview of chaplaincy, the requirements, the nature of military chaplaincy, the basic benefits that are offered to military chaplains. And so right now I'm just going to move on to the second part of this, which is just offering 3 real-life examples of chaplains who have existed, or possibly that I've known. Anyway, the first one is a chaplain who goes by the last name of Hardin. So it's Chaplain Hardin. He was a captain, and I just read about him in it's called Speech Communications 101, a redemptive history of various careers. Anyway, Chaplain Harden, he was a captain. He was on a deployment, and the story that basically this gets into is he was actually in a Humvee with a bunch of other soldiers that he was ministering to, and in the process he ended up hitting an IED, and basically there was a lot of injuries that went along with this. The Chaplain Harden, he suffered light injuries for the most part. His eyes were damaged, his face, he suffered certain facial burns and so forth. But the thing is that from this, he was actually shaken up internally a lot, and people, especially like unbelievers, people who didn't agree with his belief system, they were constantly checking in with him to see if he still believed in God, because they basically, some people were wondering, what he had done to anger God or whatever the case may be. But the thing is he did end up recovering from his injuries, the trauma that he suffered, and as a result of this, he had the opportunity, especially on deployments, to help soldiers who were similarly suffering. Basically, typically anybody who's been in any kind of IED or traumatic type event, they do get shaken up internally, even if they do survive the process. And Chaplain Harden had the opportunity to really establish people in faith, to help them stay in faith despite the hardship of what they were going through, and he just had an instrumental role in helping people recover and just undergo the healing process. A second chaplain example of basically that illustrates the possible help that chaplains can offer people is from a lieutenant colonel that I knew personally, that I met many times, that I actually had a decent relationship with, that I saw on drill weekends. But his name was Chaplain Moore. And Chaplain Moore, the thing that stood out to me the most about him was the way that he would empower service members to enter into ministry service. Basically, especially like on deployment situations, he would employ their help, and he would help them just do simple things for the most part, but help out with services, help out with serving various service members while in deployments, and that just helped encourage a lot of service members who I talked to about Chaplain Moore, and they said that basically he helped them keep an eternal mindset, and it just comforted them a lot while they were away from home, while their base was being mortared on a daily basis, while they were in constant, potentially fearful situations. It helped comfort them to know that they were being useful in an eternity-centered way while they were serving the purposes of the Air Force mission. As a final chaplain example, there's a chaplain named Struecker, and this guy stood out to me because he was an Army Ranger before he became a chaplain. He was mentally and physically extremely tough, and even as a chaplain, he was actually a jump master. So he was actually in charge of preparing soldiers to jump out of aircraft. So he was actually, a chaplain, but he was also in charge of some life and death affairs of soldiers at the same time. This guy was very hardcore. He was obviously, had that Ranger mentality even as a chaplain, and because of that, because he was so intimately involved in the lives of his soldiers and their life and death affairs, the thing is that he had the opportunity through that kind of service to pass on faith, because a lot of times people don't take ministers seriously, but all the soldiers respected this man, even those who didn't agree with his belief system. They respected him, and that gave him the opportunity to pass on his faith through what is called servant evangelism. Servant evangelism just being that aspect of evangelism where a person serves another, and that opens the door for effective evangelism, passing on, my faith to another person through that service, showing that you really care. And Struecker was a guy who was, he was a chaplain who was willing to put his own life on the line for others. He was willing to live in the trenches with his fellow soldiers. He was there, and that kind of service offered him the opportunity, a very unique opportunity that most pastors don't have, to serve those who are serving and to pass on his faith in that way. So anyway, that concludes those illustrations. So in this speech, I've just briefly covered the overview of chaplaincy, the requirements of chaplaincy, the nature of military chaplaincy, the benefits offered chaplains, and I just gave 3 brief illustrations of various chaplains who have had an impact on many people's lives as they serve those who are serving. If you know anybody, possibly you yourself, have ever considered being a chaplain, or if you have ever known somebody being a chaplain, just know that Chaplaincy is, it's a very unique calling. It's a special calling. It's hard to get to, but if you have ever considered that, then you are considering a career that has the opportunity to inspire people's faith, to serve people, especially serving U.S. military members in ways that typically pastors and other various ministers don't have the opportunity for. You can honor your God and your country by serving those who are serving.